There are moments in history when alliances don't slowly weaken, they snap.
4 major USA allies sent their leaders to Beijing to reset relations with China.
NATO's foreign ministers have convened for a major meeting in Brussels.
They shut Donald Trump out of NATO's decision-making structure.
In a sharp turn now, President Trump has slammed the NATO, claiming only the United States makes the alliance effective.
What happens when the alliance that shaped the modern world starts to lose faith in its leader? What happens when countries that once trusted Washington with their security, their future, and their survival begin to look elsewhere, not in secret meetings, not in signed treaties, but in public opinion? What does it say about the state of global power when citizens inside NATO now view China's leadership more favorably than America's? And most importantly, is this just a warning sign, or the beginning of the end of U.S. dominance inside its own alliance? Because something fundamental is shifting inside NATO, quietly, gradually, but unmistakably. The moment the numbers stopped lying. For decades, NATO survived not just because of tanks, missiles, and mutual defense clauses, but because of belief. Belief that the United States was stable. Belief that it was predictable. Belief that, when things went wrong, Washington would lead, not threaten, not coerce, not surprise its allies. That belief is now cracking. Across NATO countries, approval of U.S. leadership has collapsed to levels not seen in generations. In several member states, China is now viewed more positively than the United States, not because these countries trust Beijing more militarily, but because they distrust Washington more politically. 8 NATO allies, Slovenia, Luxembourg, Turkey, Bulgaria, Spain, Montenegro, Iceland, and Greece, now show a clear public preference for China's leadership over America's by double-digit margins. This is not a coincidence, and it's not a temporary dip. It is the result of accumulated pressure, frustration, and uncertainty that has been building for years. NATO was built for a different world. NATO was born in a moment of clarity. The world was divided. The threat was obvious. The enemy was known. The Soviet Union stood on one side. The United States led the other. But the world NATO was designed for no longer exists. Today's strategic environment is fractured, multipolar, and unstable. NATO is no longer just deterring one enemy. It is managing overlapping crises. A grinding, open-ended war in Ukraine. A resurgent Russia adapting to long-term conflict. A rising China expanding economic and political influence. A United States increasingly divided at home and unpredictable abroad. For many NATO members, the alliance now feels less like a shield and more like a pressure system, pulling them in conflicting directions at the same time. The American problem inside the alliance. The collapse in U.S. approval did not happen overnight. It followed a pattern. First came political whiplash, administrations that radically reversed foreign policy every 4 years. Then came public threats against allies, questioning mutual defense, hinting at abandonment, framing alliances as transactions rather than commitments. Then came unilateral actions, military moves, aggressive rhetoric, and territorial talk that shocked even close partners. Talk of seizing Greenland, military action without allied consensus, publicly demanding loyalty while privately signaling withdrawal. For many NATO countries, the message was clear. America is powerful, but no longer predictable. And unpredictability is the enemy of alliances. The 5% demand that broke the spell. For decades, NATO operated around a shared benchmark, defense spending of roughly 2% of GDP. Not every country met it, not every year, but it was understood as a realistic balance between security and domestic needs. That balance was shattered when Washington demanded allies raise defense spending to 5% of GDP. For many countries, that number was not just high, it was politically impossible. 5% means slashing social programs. 5% means cutting healthcare, pensions, and infrastructure. 5% means explaining to voters why tanks matter more than rent. Instead of persuasion, many citizens felt coerced. Instead of partnership, they felt pressure, and resentment grew. Why China looks different from Washington. China does not ask NATO countries to spend 5% of GDP on defense. China does not lecture European publics about military obligations. China shows up with loans, infrastructure projects, ports, railways, and investment deals. To voters struggling with inflation, unemployment, and housing costs, that matters. Beijing presents itself not as a security enforcer, but as an economic partner. Whether that image is complete or misleading is beside the point. What matters is perception, and perception is now reshaping political reality inside NATO. The 8 countries that tell the story. The list of NATO countries where China now outpolls the United States is revealing. It includes wealthy Western states. It includes small Balkan nations. It includes frontline states and distant ones. Spain, a major Western economy where defense fatigue runs deep. Greece, long frustrated by alliance politics and regional tensions. Turkey, a NATO member increasingly charting its own independent path. Bulgaria and Montenegro, countries balancing between influence spheres. Slovenia and Luxembourg, small but economically exposed states. Iceland, a NATO member without an army, deeply sensitive to instability. This is not ideological alignment with China. It is strategic hedging against American uncertainty. The 3 countries still betting on America. Only 3 NATO members clearly prefer U.S. leadership over China: Poland, Romania, Albania. Their reasons are simple. They live closer to Russia's border. They feel the threat more directly. They rely more heavily on American military protection. Geography still matters. But even here, support is pragmatic, not romantic. The rest of NATO is no longer emotionally invested in American leadership. It is calculating risk. This is not a NATO exit. It's a NATO drift. No NATO country is formally leaving the alliance. No one is tearing up Article 5. No one is signing defense treaties with Beijing. But something subtler and arguably more dangerous is happening. NATO is drifting. Strategic consensus is thinning. Public support is fragmenting. Political unity is weakening. And alliances don't collapse with explosions. They collapse with hesitation. The Russia-China factor. As NATO fractures internally, its adversaries are coordinating externally. Russia and China are not allies in name, but they are aligned in interest. Both benefit from a distracted, divided West. Both benefit from reduced American credibility. Both benefit when NATO hesitates instead of acts. Every crack inside the alliance is an opportunity outside it. What happens if this trend continues? If public opinion continues to tilt away from U.S. leadership, NATO decisions will become slower. Collective responses will weaken. Defense commitments will be questioned. Strategic ambiguity will grow. In the worst case, NATO becomes a shell, existing on paper but paralyzed in practice. Not because enemies defeated it, but because trust eroded from within. This is a warning, not a verdict. This moment does not mean NATO is finished, but it does mean NATO is being tested in a way it hasn't been since the Cold War. Alliances survive not by force, but by legitimacy. Right now, American leadership inside NATO is losing legitimacy in the eyes of the very publics it depends on. That is reversible, but only if it is acknowledged. The choice ahead. The transatlantic relationship is being pulled in opposing directions. Security versus economics. pressure versus persuasion, dominance versus partnership. The question is not whether NATO will change. The question is whether it will adapt or fracture. If you care about global stability, alliances, and the balance of power in a rapidly changing world, you cannot ignore what these numbers are telling us. Pay attention to public opinion, because it shapes policy. Question simplistic narratives, because reality is more complex. Demand leadership that builds trust, not resentment. And most importantly, stay informed, because the future of NATO won't be decided in one dramatic moment. It will be decided quietly, country by country, opinion by opinion. And by the time the fracture is obvious, it may already be too late. Stay blessed and stay curious.